Good evening. The recent public display of racial brutality in this society presented me with a binary choice. I found myself at an intellectual or moral intersection. On the one hand, shut up, stay within my bubble, retreat and unplug, keep smiling, entertaining because I live in a good neighborhood. My family's okay. I have some white friends who are nice to me, or speak up, listen closer, learn. I chose to lean in and abandon the false veneer of a safe, diverse community and press into identifying with the reality of the Black man in America. Indeed, these past few weeks, I've cried, I felt resentment, because when I look in the mirror, I am Ahmaud Arbery. I run every morning. When I look in the mirror, I see George Floyd, a 6'3", 200 plus pound man. So I subscribe to the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he says, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. This is a conversation about racism, its impact, its effects on the lives of Black men, Black women, Black people, the society, and the society at large. Dealing with it as a central part of our survival as a people. We chose to approach this conversation today from the perspective of raising Black sons, Black men, because we know the sickening statistics. Here they go. 12 years old Tamir Rice, killed for having a toy gun. 22 years old Ahmaud Arbery, killed while out jogging, as I do every morning. 23-year-old Sean Bell, killed the day of his wedding. 25 years old Freddie Gray, killed while in custody. 26-year-old Breonna Taylor, killed while at home in her bed. 28 years old Michael Brown, killed. 44 years old Eric Gardner, killed while being suspected of selling cigarettes. 46-year-old George Floyd, killed, accused of giving a fake $20 note. This afternoon, I ask you to pull up your chairs. Come closer. You're in for a real, raw, vulnerable conversation. We will seek to examine the experience of raising Black sons in the years in the society. We'll share personal experiences that we have endured over the years, but ultimately seeking to find the tools, the information to equip and empower. That's our purpose today, to empower. Indeed, our conversation is about hope through the tears and the pain. The conversation is to create change. I believe change starts with education and the willingness to have an uncomfortable yet courageous conversation, fully aware of the history that cynically screams the question, what's different this time? Ricardo, what's going to be different? What is different this time? What haven't we seen before? But bolstered by the hope of our ancestors that a change is going to come. So this evening, you've joined us at our virtual kitchen table. I'm at my kitchen table with my friends who are about to come in to have a courageous conversation among friends. Stephen Covey says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. So I'm going to hear about their story. I'm going to hear about their experience. I know they're navigating through this pandemic of racial injustice with their sons and daughters in tow. So welcome, my friends. They are Dr. Roger Ball. He's an educator, assistant principal at New York City Department of Education, a clinician, and he's an author and a father of 1, 2, 3, 4.
That's right.
Dr. Ball, welcome, bro.
Thank you so much, my brother, and thank you so much for having me tonight.
It's my pleasure. We also have welcome into the conversation to my kitchen table tonight, Mr. G. Wayne Elliott. Wayne is a corporate executive at Chase. He serves as the executive chairman at Bronx Bethany Community Corporation and the board of trustees. He's on the board of trustees for Eastern Nazarene College. He's a husband also, and he's a father of 2. What's up, Wayne? How you doing, bro? Come on in.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me, Ricardo. It's really exciting to be here.
It's my pleasure. My kitchen table is empty now. I soon give you guys a fruit. We next have Wayne Kadeem Williams, Mr. Kadeem Williams. He's a graduate, a class of 2020 graduate of the University of Texas at Austin with a master's in educational leadership and policy. He's a son, he's a brother, and he's my little brother, Kadeem Williams. Hey, Kadeem, how you doing, bro?
How you doing? Looking forward to the conversation. Thank you for inviting me on it.
Glad to have you aboard. And there's no conversation about Black men that can be had, without the presence of a Black woman, a mother. I'm delighted to have at the kitchen table with me today my friend who is an author, a speaker, a broadcaster, a communication specialist. In fact, communication for her is everything. She's a mother of a brilliant and talented young lady. She's the lady who has opened all the doors for me in radio in this country, WKMB, WLIB. And welcome my friend, Denise Hill. Hey, Denise.
Hello. Thank you so much for including me in the conversation.
Thank you so much. So, guys, you're around my kitchen table. This is it. Food will be served. Feel free to eat abundantly. Eat all of it. So as you come on in, it's about the conversation. And of course, we've already spoken about what we're going to talk about. So let me jump in. And I'm going to start with Denise. Just give us a little about yourself. Where you grew up, where you were born. Tell us a little about Denise Hill.
Well, I was born and raised DMV. That's DC, Maryland, and Virginia, right on the border of Washington, DC, and Prince George's County, Maryland. And, one of the first families to move in the middle class neighborhood. And of course, once one enters, everybody who isn't of that descent leaves. But we had a very interesting upbringing. I was I want to say sheltered for a long time. I mean, everything was people of color. I lived in a Black neighborhood, went to Black schools, everything. So, there were those opportunities, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, where race played a very interesting and sometimes traumatic moments in my life that were very significant in who I am now. But I'm an educator. Yes. I am, as you said, a media personality, and everything I do in life is really to just help change lives.
All right. So Denise, she's a daughter of the DMV, everybody. District, Maryland, and Virginia.
Yes.
Next, we go over to Kadeem Williams. Kadeem, tell us where you're born, man. Tell us about your upbringing a little bit.
Yeah, so Kadeem Williams, like you mentioned, I'm a son, I'm a brother, son of a single mother, brother of an older sister. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, from a neighborhood called Brownsville. Mother currently right now lives in Canarsie in Brooklyn while I'm out here in Austin, Texas for a little while longer. But yeah, kind of similar to Denise, growing up in Brownsville, growing up in Brooklyn, everybody around me was people of color. And so they always call Brooklyn that melting pot. But for the most part, everybody I was around in schools, in my neighborhoods were people of color. And so that really did affect kind of like my upbringing growing up and the impact. I will say it was me, and we'll get into later, but the opportunities and experiences that I've had in school has really enlightened me. And like you touched on earlier, the education piece has really allowed me to be more aware and more conscious of the things that are going on in our society. With me seeing the importance of education, that's the reason why I decided to go for a master's degree in higher education leadership, to be able to educate and help guide kind of the next generation. So they continue to be educated and even be better than kind of what's currently going on now.
Okay, good. Grew up in Brownsville, and of course of Jamaican parentage, right? In Brooklyn.
Yeah.
All right, great. Next, we go over to G. Wayne Elliott. Wayne, where did you grow up? Tell us a little about your upbringing, man.
So I'm a product of the South, a little bit different from the colleagues on the panel. My father was in the Air Force, and he was born and raised in Waco, Texas. He met my mom in Key West, Florida. They got married. And I spent my elementary school years in San Antonio, Texas, and my middle school and high school years in Key West, Florida, the southernmost point of the United States. And a product of, the South, meaning that I experienced the N-word multiple times in every state that I lived in, and I've lived in multiple states. And that kind of
we're gonna get there. I want to know exactly. So you're from the South, right?
I'm from the South.
So far we have one from the DMV. We are from the South. We are from Brooklyn. Let me swing over to now Dr. Roger Ball. Talk to me.
Good evening again, to my fellow panelists, and of course to our host Ricardo, Brian, and to all of my brothers and sisters out there. Pleasant good evening to you, or good afternoon, as it were. My name is Roger Ball, and I am an immigrant. I was born in Jamaica and migrated to the United States just around my 17th birthday, and have lived in the Bronx for some time, subsequently moved to Westchester, where I currently reside and raising my family. I am an advocate, I am an educator, I am a preacher, I am a teacher, and I live to make a difference in this world. And so during these times, I feel as though it is, the fields are truly ripe and ready for harvesting, just in terms of the opportunity to make a difference. So I speak the language of an immigrant. I walk in the shoes of an immigrant from Jamaica, in part from Old Harbor. I know that will sound familiar to Ricardo. From Old Harbor, really, from Old Harbor, Old Harbor Bay area, and Palmer's Cross in Clarendon. So I'm proud to be a Jamaican, an immigrant during this time.
Can I tell you, that is why, welcome to the table, everybody. Thanks for introducing. So we have two immigrants here, myself and Roger Ball. And can I tell you, for the first time, I follow that Roger Ball grew up the road from me. I grew up in Old Harbor Bay, St. Catherine, just up the road from me. And we meet all this time. We have two Americans right here. We have from the DMV, from the South. And of course, we have a Jamaican, Kadeem, who is a son of a Jamaican woman. So you couldn't have had it any better, those of you watching online. So remember, go ahead and share. We're about to jump in now, and we'll take your questions later on. So we're going to have a Q&A session. Let's go. It's a conversation that is intended to be real, to be raw. It's a conversation that's intended to unearth, examine, and ultimately empower. So first question I have for you, and let me start with Kadeem. At what age were you when you recognized that you were treated differently because of the color of your skin?
For me, probably not a specific age, but for me, it was like definitely when I was in high school.
Yeah.
Definitely took me until high school for me to really understand. Like I always knew that I was, Black and African American. I knew my identity. And growing up, there's always the movies of people who look like you, and you're watching and you realize that people who look like you that are Black and African American, especially young people, are not being treated fairly by, police or by the system. And so that's kind of how I related to those things. But I didn't really see the impact that it really has on the effects on my personal life was until I got to high school, where I was able to have a teacher who was very unorthodox. He taught me global history. Her name is Miss Harry. Probably one of my favorite people ever. And she literally broke it down. The way she taught us global history, she rarely used the textbook. And what she did, she's a firm believer in now making sure, one, that that her class was very educated on and knowledgeable and was learning about the roots from Africa and where that started, and how civilization started here. And then she did a great job of now everything that in the textbook is just a small paragraph. She would make sure she brings in worksheets and documentaries and movies to now expand upon that, so that we're able to learn more about kind of the culture of our race that is Black. And so yeah, it was there, and then on,
Okay.
she made sure that she connected what's learned inside the classroom to life. And so that's how I learned more about systematic racism, and how
Okay.
me as a Black man, how do I navigate that?
Mm. Denise, when was it that you knew, you recognized that I'm treated differently because of the color of my skin?
I have a very vivid memory of, I think I must have been about 10 years old or so, of going into a store in a mall. It's Iverson Mall in Temple Hills, Maryland, right on the border of Washington, D.C. And I was followed around this store, and you know, it wasn't the type of follow where, can I help you? It wasn't that type of follow. It was like something suspicious is going on. And I don't know. I've always been kind of, I guess, bold, you could say. And I'm like, what's that? Why are you following behind me? And I don't recall getting an answer, but I did talk to my mother later on, and you know, with great frustration. I'm sure I shouldn't have directed it at her, but to have just a shattering of innocence, if you will, it was kind of traumatic, and there were no the conversations that take place, particularly with parents who have young Black men, where you sit down and have those conversations don't typically always take place. Now they're probably more prevalent, but for those who had daughters, we didn't have conversations when we sat down and talked about race. I had two sisters before me, and this was before my younger brother came, so it wasn't a conversation where you sat down and talked about race. But that incident forced me to confront my mother, who was quite offended because she had all the books. You know, she had the Eat to Live by Elijah Muhammad, and she had all the books. They were right there for us to see, but no kid is going to willingly just say, let me go read a book about my history. Those conversations just didn't take place. But that instance, in that situation at that mall, being followed around simply because of how I looked or who I was perceived to be, that was when my innocence was shattered.
How old were you again?
I was about 10.
10 years old.
Yeah, I was about 10, 11 years old.
I swing it to Wayne. Wayne, when it just hits your consciousness that you're treated differently because you look different.
So my father was in the service, so we lived on an Air Force base until the first semester of my first grade year. So I was 6.
Yes.
And we moved. My mom really wanted to get into a house, so we moved to a new neighborhood. And they sent my sister to a public school. She's 2 grades ahead of me. And for some reason, we had to go to see a psychologist. And couldn't understand why we were seeing a psychologist. But come to find out shortly after the session that when they sent my sister to the Catholic school, they were using N-word on her.
Yeah.
And which caused the discussions to increase at home. You know, having a father parents at the time together who were struggling with how do you coach and counsel someone who's treating you differently. So this was me seeing it in her, and then subsequently more and more happening to me in the public school as well.
Roger, you came here at 17. You lived in Jamaica for those 17 years before you came here. What is your experience? Because I just want to know, in this panel around my kitchen table, when is it that you recognize that I am treated differently?
Well, my experiences, of course, are very different as an immigrant and I migrated to the United States again as a teenager into a community that was symbolic or very much a representation of the community that I was coming from. That is, I lived in a neighborhood where lots of my neighbors and my friends and my classmates were also from Jamaica. I grew up,
Okay.
I went to Evander Charles High School there in the Bronx, where it is a lot of people that look like me and are from the same place. And so that was, I think for me, it wasn't until I actually was a young adult and an adult that I went to, whether it was in the non-for-profit world, whether I had to give a presentation or something like that. One thing that stands out very vividly for me was when I bought my first home in suburbia. My wife and I were relatively young. I think we were maybe 30. We were probably 30. Of course, there were other incidents before that. But I remember our neighbors not really welcoming us. I remember, saying, "Hey, good morning. How are you doing, neighbor?" No, let's just keep it moving. Or when the city knocked on our doors and the local law enforcement knocked on our doors and said it was reported that there's a whole bunch of people living in this house and that they're also dealing drugs from out of your house. That was shattering. That was shattering. We had just bought a beautiful home in right there in Yonkers where we live, and
No, take your time and say that. You're sitting up on your door. Take your time, say it again.
Well, we were young people. We just bought this home, and what I'll say is that it felt as though all of our hopes and dreams had been upended by these people, these law enforcement, the city visiting our homes, telling me I was a young preacher, a young father, and I am dealing drugs out of my home. And so in that moment, it made me want to not be there, made me felt vulnerable that somehow I had made an awful decision to buy this house in this particular community. And so I remember that vividly. There are other stories, but that was very personal because I had my young children in the house. This was our new home, and this was 15 years ago. And so, as an immigrant, I have a very different sense of also how to respond to some of those kinds of things because in some ways,
before you respond, Doc, I want to show the age gap, the timing when one encounters the knowledge of recognize that I'm treated differently because of my race. For Roger, it was almost 30, where he felt it up front. For Denise, it was 10. For Wayne, similarly, a little kid. Kadeem, high school. And I say that because one of the things that we deal with in our society is the difference with immigrants and immigrants of African American descent in the society, or prism and the lenses through which we see, treat with, deal with, and encounter racism versus those who are born here and the timeline in which they have to deal with that quickly. In fact, it is Toni Morrison who said that there comes a time in everybody's lives when he or she discovers that you're white or non-white. And it becomes almost a traumatic experience because it's a moment of separation. It's a moment when you say, this person whom I love, who is my best friend, I was just told something happened. Maybe you couldn't come to the person's home, that you were not the same as you thought. As we said, this conversation is particularly pitched on raising Black men, with, of course, not excluding our Black sisters. But I want to be mindful of the child in this conversation, fathers, mother, and a young man. So the next question I have for you is, how do you believe, well, how did it make you feel? And what are you grappling with now as parents? And I start with you parents first before I go to Kadim. What are you grappling with now, having to treat your child as he or she comes home with the same reality that you faced? Denise?
It's not a now thing for me. I think because I didn't have some of those conversations early. I've always had them early with my daughter, and you know, the conversations were very much layered. In other words, it's not just, you know, the you're Black conversation, but it's the you're a Black woman conversation, and then there's the you're a light-skinned Black woman conversation. I mean, it's like layers on layers on layers. And so, you know, I've had to have those conversations with her early. Unfortunately, having those conversations early did not protect her from the pain of still having to deal with those encounters from elementary school all the way up to now. She's in college at a PWI, a predominantly white institution, and you know, being the only face of color in the class, you have to kind of, you know, double down and be willing to hold it down and be the representative, even if you don't want to, but they see you as that. So even having to deal with those challenges, I made sure to have those conversations with her very early.
Yeah. Wayne, how did you have to deal with your two children, having gone through what you went through, having seen what your sister went through?
It's the same as Denise, with the exception of my approach. We were intentional. I say we, my wife and I were intentional that we sent them to a Montessori school, which was predominantly really diverse. And then we moved when we got to they got to first grade up to where we live now, which it's predominantly white. And we didn't say white, Black in the house. We had a code for white people in the house that we used until my son got into second grade. And when he had to take the bus to the school, and when he got into school, then the issue of race punched us in the face. Not only from how he was treated by his classmates, but also our own baggage. So
talk to us a little about that.
So meaning that first day of school, we're at the bus stop, and one of the young girls wants to like touch Gavry because he's the only Black boy at the bus stop, and so there was a reaction from a family member, and at the young girl wanted to touch him, and turned out later that the young girl was on the spectrum, autistic, and had never seen a Black boy before. But because of the stuff that we had going on, it caused some tension on the block, and so that's the start of being in this community. And it just so happens to be the same community that Michelle grew up in, and we're dealing with the same issue she dealt with over 30 years ago. Yeah. So it was a tough start to the experience. However, we made the choice to be here, and the balance of being I can speak for myself. This is my story. We chose to be here because the school district is one of the best in the country. Like, it was a conscious choice. My challenge as a Black man and a Black father is making sure that when the way I grew up, it was like, you got to suck it up. Like, you got to be twice as good. Like, you got to be better than these white folks. You can't, like, that's how we were drilled to be. There's a balance between that and empathy and encouragement, and making sure that, like, you're confident in whose you are, but also being a defender of them in these challenging situations. It can accumulate the level of slights that you can see, feel in those kinds of circumstances. So we're actually in the midst of that right now.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Again, Wayne has 17-year-old and 16-year-old children. Denise has a college student. Roger Ball has college, high school, middle school, right, Roger?
No, high school, college, and pre-K.
You're pre-K. And
Denise,
here's what I'm going to jump.
wow. Denise, don't say wow. That's what I said.
That,
He's
that's
a
a
busy guy.
fan.
Busy guy, Denise. But I want to go to something directly. Again, those of you watching, welcome, coming on board, putting your questions. We are going to answer questions. But again, this is a courageous conversation. I'm going to press something right now. I'm going to press about the school. And Dr. Ball and Kadeem, definitely I will throw this at you. Again, our Nobel Prize winner, Toni Morrison, says racism is a scholarly affair taught by theologians, scientists, educators, and it is ingrained in the education that we receive. Question: do you think our education system curriculum reflects what Toni Morrison says? Dr. Ball, you are an administrator, assistant principal. What do you believe? Do you think our education system as it exists today is part of the problem?
Absolutely. I think if can I just take a minute and give an example here? When years ago, when one of my kids were very young, and to make the point, to accentuate the point, when one of my kids were very, very young, we had a babysitter that came and helped out and took care of our young baby. This was many years ago, and one of our child came downstairs and saw the babysitter sitting down at the table and really having breakfast. And the baby girl said to my baby girl said to the lady, "What are you doing? You're not supposed to be eating. You're supposed to be working, working, working." The point that I'm making here is this. Of course, the woman was shattered. Even though in our house, you hungry, you take food. You come visit me, the fridge, mi casa es tu casa. You go in the pantry and you take what you need. What happens with racism is that it's embedded in the very structure of institution. It's in a way, it's the wall that makes the house. It's embedded. It is so finely woven into the way we live that sometimes it's hard to see. So it's the curriculum that we write. It's the picture in the curriculum. It's the stories that's told in the curriculum. It's who is the hero and who is the villain. Right? It's how Christopher Columbus discovered a continent that was already occupied by others. It says that history is told by those with the biggest gun and with those who won the war. And so when you have African American children, Black children, Latino children, and their teachers are white, or their teachers do not understand their cultural norms and backgrounds, they're oftentimes isolated. I teach at Fordham University, and I can't tell you how many times I've had young people, these are college, these are master's level students that I'm teaching. They come to me with tears running down their faces and saying, "Dr. Ball, thank you so much. And you're Jamaican, and you're from the Caribbean, and I've never had a Black professor." People, to know who they are, to find out where they are, they really need to look at themselves, and themselves include people that look and sound and sing and talk and dance like the way they do and where they're from. So when you have a curriculum, when you have a instructor of that curriculum, that neither the curriculum understands our young people and their history and their culture, and then you have the curriculum and the one who's teaching that curriculum that is also removed from the social and the experiences of those young people, it eventually brings a number of things: loss of interest in education, early dropout rate, and marginalizing those young people, so the stories are never told.
Kadeem, go ahead, Wayne. Jump in, Wayne.
I just want to offer 2 points. So about curriculum.
Yes.
So in I grew up in the 70s.
Yes.
The movie Roots came out.
Mm.
And the curriculum of blacks in America at that time in elementary school was simply this: a paragraph or two on slavery that explicitly said that black people appreciated slavery because after slavery was over, they didn't know how to conduct themselves. They needed people to lead them. That's the context with which a whole generation of people were taught. So from a filter perspective, kids who are, if you're 1, 2, 5 black kids in that class, you gotta have the other 25 people looking at you from that perspective. So that's one. The second thing is today, or I guess 5 or 6 years ago, the curriculum might be a little bit better, a little bit more expanded, but my son in his history class had to see and watch on the board where a professor had the Confederate flag in New York State in Chappaqua, right?
Yeah.
And the argument for having the flag up was it's a part of history. So those two very specific ways that from a curriculum perspective, from a lack of awareness perspective, that the system can cause problems.
I agree. And I believe that. Kadeem, you just graduated, sir, with a master's degree in leadership and policy. We're going directional with this conversation. We're referring to the past and we're going forward with it for empowerment. Kadeem, how do you believe, Kadeem, and as a leader going in, as a black man, I want to even ask you what you experienced. What do you think is needed to fix and address this in education?
Yeah, I think what is needed, I think, because the first part I want to make is that education is where kind of the socialization begins for a lot of us, you know, especially as G-Wing alluded to, you know, you're learning about things within our culture, the history of our culture that's not necessarily accurate or it's not as expanded, right? And so to me, I think to move forward, I think education is where the biggest change needs to happen, right?
Yeah.
Especially coming from a Caribbean household, you know, education is the most important thing. And so for me, I understood that. And so if a lot of kids are now going to school, it is important that we're now changing the very beginning of where that socializations begin, because, you know, it is not always just at home. School is also a part of the experiences and the learning processes of now how these young black boys and girls that are growing into young men and young women are now beginning to now succeed in being able to now channel their experiences. And so now we have to be able to change the curriculum. We have to be able to now have these uncomfortable conversations now,
Yes.
you know, in the spaces where, whether it be at predominantly white institutions or minority serving institutions, we have to be able to have those conversations and be willing to now make change within the education system, so that now we're going against the norm, the traditional socialized kind of factors.
There are two other questions I have on school because I have to move on to church. Again, welcome everybody if you're just tuning in. This is a courageous conversation we're having, first of its series. There you go, Denise, I've said the word. And the intention today is to examine, unearth, evaluate, ultimately empower and uplift. We're talking to Roger Ball, Wayne Elliott, Denise Hill, and Kadeem Williams, of course, around my kitchen table. Let me go to two more questions on the schooling. Black history, again, my boys are in school, and I noticed the discussion around Black history awareness only happens in February. And I'm wondering, when is it, and should it be time when it becomes a part of the curriculum where it's not just what Martin Luther King did, but basically the true history of the blacks, the enslaved. I struggle with the word slaves, guys, just let you know. I struggle with the word slaves, the enslaved, the true history of the enslaved in this society. Denise, you want to take a slice of that? At what point should this be, if to be compulsory? Every child needs to understand the contribution of, the importance of the enslaved African people to this society.
I mean, if this was utopia, that would be from day one, because it's part of the history of this country. So it should be interwoven within the conversation. Same with indigenous peoples of this country. I mean, it's just part of the conversation, and they show up less than us. So
Yes.
it should be part of the conversation. And if I can add to what both our panelists said prior, you know, I'm an educator as well.
Yes.
The bulk of my career, 25 years, has been in adult education. Though I've taught middle school, it's been in adult education. And so by the time someone comes to me, it's the end of the road for them. They're coming to get their GED primarily, to get their high school diploma and move on in life. And you see at that point the failures, if you will, of American education, because it's not just the compartmentalized book knowledge that I'm referring to, but even the socialization that Kadeem spoke about and everything. It's just been a massive failure to the point where this person is at the end of their road. And if they don't get this one piece of paper that the system says they need, they don't even have a chance to make half a step to support their household. And it trickles down into everything. I know we're going into other areas as well, but it trickles down into everything, to not just have the options available to you because an education, a proper education, was given to you, that somebody didn't give up on you because you didn't know fractions and they stuck you in special education. When I transitioned from middle school to high school, they put me in special education because I didn't know then that I was dyslexic. I didn't even know what the word was until I became a teacher, to be able to begin to even get diagnosed, self-diagnosed first, and then actually take some of the tests that my students was taking, to be able to say, oh, this is why I have challenges reading. This is why I start on this line and I end on this line and miss all these lines between it. You know, all of those things. But had my mother not showed up, I like to paint the picture for people that she was the crazy, you know, Black woman with the rollers in her hair and the rolling pin showing up in her bathrobe and slippers. That wasn't her. She was far more professional, but she was just that angry. And had she not demanded that they take her child out that special education class, my life could have been completely different. I would have been the one that they just gave up on because I was literally told I was not smart enough to be with the other students that I had just come from middle school with. I was not intelligent enough. I wasn't smart enough to be able to be with because I couldn't read. So now we're dealing with a system that just funnels people through and says, you know, we can talk about that you didn't get taught your culture, you didn't get taught your history, but you didn't get taught the Black experience, but you also didn't get taught at all because you appear to be an issue or you tested too low. And so we're going to funnel you through this system. We might give you a special education certificate, which is not even a high school diploma. So then you get challenges later on when you try to go into college and things of that nature. But it's not just about the content or the pedagogy. It's about the structure and the system that all of this is set up within, that forces people through this system that eventually you're going to hit a roadblock, and eventually you're going to hit a stop sign, and it forces you to that place. And there are certain people who, once they hit that wall, don't have the social skills to be able to, the critical thinking skills, the different life skills to be able to function past that block. And that's when you get the crime rate skyrocketing in certain areas. That's when you get, because if I got 4 kids and it's a question of whether or not this man is not going to hire me because I don't have a high school diploma, or I get some food out your house because I know you got some, that's where I'm going, or from this store or whatever. And it creates situations and scenarios that are right for the things that people point to as the Black community, as our ill. And so when we talk about education, we can't just talk about the structure of the curriculum. We got to talk about everything that creates this perfect storm of people just not being able to be the best version of themselves and not show up to be the productive citizens that everybody wants to point their finger as the people in our culture not being. It's all inclusive of all of that.
Thanks, Denise. Let me tell you, I'm leaning in to learn because I know we're tracing the path of a young black son, a young black daughter, and it starts at the home. And I know, again, the topics I'm touching, it's a survey because we have to spend a conversation in each. This is a survey as the first of the series, and school education itself can just be what it is. But I'm just going to ask one more thing, and have to move along to something that we're going to go sit up on. A friend texted me and said, Ricardo, the first time my son learned that he's black was at school. Yeah. And we wondered to ourselves, and she said, ask someone in the panel who can handle this. How should we broach the subject of racism with our kids' teachers? Who want to catch that?
Well, when you meaning, how they communicate to the kids, how they treat the kids.
Yes,
I think,
yes. Because
I will tell you how we approach.
Let me tell you the context too. And again, this conversation, as I'm leaning in, this conversation also bear in mind where I am a Caribbean man, where during my entire life, as I've always said, I only knew I was black when I moved to the United States of America. In Jamaica, I knew I was poor. I knew I came from country versus town. So Jamaica has a couple systems: country, town, rich, poor, upper class, no, uptown, downtown. We have all those things. Undertone of color is there, but it's usually those type of structures. And for me, my experience is education just move you through whatever is going on there. So I'm leaning into this one to learn, because in my home right now, we never spoke about color to any of our children until my 9-year-old said to us recently, Daddy, why are the police treating us like that? It's because we're black? I've never seen them treat a white like that before. My 9-year-old, not my 12, my 9. So the question back here, Wayne, back to the original question I got. We're learning today, courageous conversation. I don't know the answer. You said, how do you Dr. Ball, anybody pick it up? How do you talk to your kids' teacher? If something happened at school, how do you handle that? When they come to discovery,
I mean, I'll jump in on that one only because, and I want to just point two things quickly before I respond to that on the issues of race. And if you go across America, and as a public school administrator, myself, my team, we've worked relentlessly in addressing this, that if you look in pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, go into any suspension sites, suspension classrooms, kids who are removed from school for behavioral issues, it will 90% of the time be that of a black or a brown boy. The second thing is go to any special education classes, and most of the times it will be that of a black or a brown boy as well. I wanted to say that. I'll give you one example. One of my young boys, and I have 2 boys, one of them was, playing around on the bus, and my kids are bused to school in middle and elementary school. And the assistant principal essentially reported to me on the phone that the next time that he plays around, it's teenagers, they're like preteen, 11, 12, something like that. The next time he plays on the bus, the driver will pull over the bus and they will call the police, and the police will actually remove him from the bus. This was what I was told. There's no violence, there was nothing. It was simply horseplaying on the bus. And that the driver will pull over and, that's when I simply get dressed, show up to the school, roll up into the principal's office and say that again? No, say that again for me. That the next time that he plays on the bus, that the driver is going to pull over on the side of the road, they will call 911 and the police will take him off the bus, and I would have to pick him up at the precinct. Say that again one more time for me. Well, a good storyteller leaves it hanging.
Well, we got that. In fact, someone just commented, we need to speak truth to our children and let them know before others do. And I understand that. There's something that I only heard in this society. only heard it here. And you all know about it. It's called The Talk. I moved here at 26 years old. I've never had the talk back home. Again, the reason I'm pressing into this conversation is because my reality as a boy growing up is not my son's reality. There's a young man who actually just something on TikTok, it's gone viral. And he's 18 years old. I think the name eludes me now. And he said that his mother, he memorized by the age of 11, all the things his mother told him never to do. By the age of 11, he was able to memorize it. Do not walk with your hands in your pocket. Do not drive with their music loud. Do not wear a wife beater. What's a wife beater? It is like a marina.
Undershirt.
The tank top, yeah.
Do not walk. Do not drive with a Duragon. Do not look at a white woman straight in her eyes. This is at 11. He memorized that. I've never had to do that. Talk to me about that, guys. Have you had the talk? Wayne, Denise, Kadeem, did your mom have that talk with you? Talk to me.
Yeah. I just I have to say this about the school thing to Dr. Ball's point.
Sure, go ahead, man.
The expectation of school administrators is that at a minimum, fathers won't show up, and particularly Black males won't be there. So I would encourage, I've been to every parent-teacher conference since the time my kids were in Montessori school, with the intentionality that they would see not only the mother, but the father. And to Roger's point about the looking the person in the eye and administrator in the eye and saying, like, really, this is how you're going to treat my child? That's one point. The second point about the talk. So we've been pretty much open and honest with our kids from way young about issues of race and other kind of challenging situations, because the school systems will teach them things before age appropriate. So not just race, but sex and things like that. So we've been having these conversations from an ongoing time. The thing about it is you just can't have it once. You got to have it multiple times. We just recently reiterated. I mean, the good thing is that my son doesn't drive, but they know how to if we're pulled over, they know exactly how to turn the lights on, put your hands on the dashboard. If it's at night, to make sure that you understand, you say yes sir, no sir. We do it over and over again, because these are things that it's easy to forget, particularly in an environment where you might feel comfortable.
I'm making note, because again, I've not had the talk, Denise. I've not had the talk because, again, it's not something in my psyche, in my reality, in my history. And that's what I'm saying to you, is that for me now, I have to do the adjustment, the shift for it. Let me go back to school a bit, because this school thing is having us. Once I got, and guys, I haven't told you my story yet, but I got maybe 3-4 years ago, a report, and on the report for my son, it said he's chatty. I'm like, wow, chatty, what does chatty mean? So I asked the teacher for a conversation, for a meeting. I wanted to see the teacher. It was Zachary, my eldest, and he was about 7 at the time. She said he's too chatty. So I went to school and asked, please explain chatty to me, because I have taught them to speak up, to be vocal, express themselves. Explain chatty to me. Does chatty mean he should be quiet? She fumbled for an answer. But I was there as a tall, big Black man, the father of my son, to understand what chatty meant. And she has never said again. And I told him to even be more vocal. Because for me, I've taught him at home, and I've taught them at home to speak up, maybe much to our detriment at times. But I refuse for a teacher to tell them that. Recently, my 9-year-old always came over complaining about his teacher. Why are you complaining about your teacher so much? I went to school to meet the teacher. I asked the teacher, why does he have a problem with you? And I told the teacher this: he responds well to affirmation. If you're not affirming him, you're going to have a problem with him, and I might ask for him to go to another class. And she said, a white teacher, she said, but I've been doing this for 26 years. I'm all right, I'm fine. I said, I know that, and I respect what you do, but if he's complaining every day about you, I'm having a problem with it because it may affect him. So Wayne, I subscribe to what you say, particularly as fathers, we must show up, and we must speak up, and we must show that we are there to support them with it. All right. I've got to move on to something else because the school took a little while, and that's fine. Again, courageous conversation. I'm going to something else. And Denise, I'm going to start this off with you. I'm going to come up to the church next. Before I go to church, I want to talk about relationships. How do you believe that you're a single mother, you're a single woman? And Denise, for me, one of the things I grapple with is the injustice that seems to be perpetuated against Black men in the society. How do you believe, Denise, that this has affected relationships with our Black women? Feel free to testify. We're being courageous about it.
I won't make the direct correlation because there's so many factors that affect relationships within our community. But I mean, there was a conversation that was on Facebook. I had to go back. There was a lot of people going back and forth with this one gentleman who made the comment that the Black man's pain is worse than the Black woman. And the first question is why are we comparing is the first issue. Like, we in this together, bro. We are in this together. So there shouldn't be any comparison. But to have the belief that a Black woman can't understand what a Black man is going through, yes, if you look at numbers, the instances of Black men being pulled over, racially profiled, killed by law enforcement officers unjustly, all of those numbers are higher compared to Black women, but it's not as though they do not exist. It's not as though our struggles are not prevalent and not impactful, especially because more times than not, we're left to fend for the household. We're left to take care of the kids. So whatever the pain is that we're carrying affects far more than just us as individuals. We're passing that pain down to our kids, and our kids are passing it down to their kids. So it shouldn't be a comparison, at all in terms of pain. But there is, from my perspective, a belief that you cannot, from Black men, you have no idea what we go through as Black men. And I'd say that that's not true. We do. We're not Black men, clearly, but we absolutely know what we need to do as Black women to support, sustain, protect, provide for, be a support, be that rib that is needed to help a Black man go through what he does go through. And so the challenges that are brought into some of the relationships can be detrimental to those relationships. And then you have the Black men who just completely turn their back on the Black woman, period.
Talk about it. Yeah.
I mean, I've told you about an instance where I was speaking. I had a speaking engagement and, shared the stage with several football players, several Hall of Fame football players. And my business partner, Puerto Rican, and she was there with me. She's much fairer skinned, straight wavy hair. They were on her like white on rice. Yes. Eventually, after we finished the conversation, after we finished the event, I was able to get a couple of them, just hanging around food. People talk around food. Let's have a conversation. And I asked. Now, as a Black woman, there's a preconceived notion that once a Black man gets to a certain status, that they ditch Black women for white women. And so that's the position that I was coming from. But I did not know how ingrained the training or how they're taught. And he said to me, because I asked him, I said, why does it seem like, didn't want to be judgmental or accusatory, but why does it seem like when Black men get to a certain status, they abandon their Black woman, the Black
Yeah.
women? And he clearly said to me that they have a saying. This particular person was an NFL player. They have a saying among the players that the only thing a Black woman can show them is the way to a white woman.
Mm.
It broke my heart. Broke
Mm.
my heart. I don't think I had been hurt that much in a long time. That broke my heart because I'm like, and I said to him very quickly, you know your mama's Black, right? And it was like, yeah, but there's the idea of the Black woman's attitude, and we don't want to deal with her drama and this, that, and the other. So whether or not it's because of some of the institutionalized things that have been pressed upon Black men, or whether it is something to, having so much trauma from the past that they feel like if they're going that Black women are just going to bring them more trauma, or whatever it is. I do not know the direct correlation, or if it in fact are these multiple factors. There are clear indications that the trauma that Black men experience throughout their life affects their ability to have relationships with Black women, sustainable relationships with Black women. And likewise, we have our own pain and trauma that we bring into relationships as well that make it hard for us together to heal as a unit.
I have some more questions for you on that, but I'm going to go to Kadeem. Kadeem, you grew up with essentially a single mom, a Jamaican mom. We know a Jamaican mom, their right hand's like kind of heavy. But Kadeem, talk to me about not having your dad in the house. How has that shaped you as a young 23-year-old successful Black man at this point? Talk to me about that dynamic. What impact has it had on you in your perception of life, of the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, on a positive note, my mom being a single mother, like I call her superwoman because the things that she was able to continue to do as a single mother raising two kids is just phenomenal. But there are a lot of struggles and challenges with that without having a father in the household, especially growing up in the neighborhood that I grew up in. Or you see your friends that have their fathers in their households, and they're teaching them certain things or having conversations with them about certain things, and you're not having that. It definitely does play a part. And as well as I'm growing up now, there's certain things that I'm wanting to now experience for myself, right? Because I'm not having the guidance of what it is to be a man, or even more so a Black man. Now my mother, she did everything that she could, right? Back in the day, there's a special touch when you have a father guiding now his son, right? I think one thing, on my mother, watching a single mother, and even watching an older sister who's she's on her way to being superwoman herself, right? And watching those two be as independent as they are, it taught me to be very respectful of the Black woman, make me be conscious and aware of the struggles that Black women in America face, not only within America, but within their own Black community as well. So it taught me to be conscious and aware of that, watching, two people that basically raised me, my older sister and my mom, go through that. But at the same time, not having a father in a household, and it was tough, because there's things on the flip side. There's not everything my mom can do as a single mom who's working, who's trying to provide for her kids, right? So she's not able to really have those certain talks of just, Kadeem, don't go here, get in the house at this time, and as you grow older, you understand the reasoning for it, but at the time you just think she's being strict, right? But I think also too, with having a single mother, I'm thankful also that I was able to have other mentors who invested in me and understanding that I had a single mother. And understanding I had a single mother, I had, for one, as my pastor back in Brooklyn, Bishop Dr. C.J. Walters, he's somebody that, he tells me all the time. My mom tells me that, from when I was younger, he said, I will be there for Kadeem, and he has been so ever since to this day. People like you give me opportunities like this, or rallies me to come have these conversations. Just other people within my life that invested in me, male figures, role models, whether it be friends, dads, godfathers, uncles, people that have been, or even teachers that I've come across, mentors in my life that have invested in me to see the potential and see, all right, if I invoke this male figure into his life, that's that
Yeah.
special touch that he already needed, that his mom already set the foundation, for.
So Kadim, let me ask you this question. Again, courageous conversation. So do you find yourself pulled to what type of woman now in your life? Single
Oh,
guys. So praise for this.
I don't I don't discriminate, but I'm all about the black woman. I think
All right.
at the end of the day, black women
Kadim,
go
you're a
through way
romantic
too much in
I'm gonna ask the
society,
question.
but
Okay. Okay. I just want to get there. I want to swing back to Denise. Denise, let me ask you this. And I want the brothers to hear this. Denise, the question that I'm going to pose at you. What were some of your anxieties and concerns raising your daughter without a father in the house?
Wow. Just her general protection, her safety. Unfortunately, there's still many challenges for women that, well, now many brothers who have experienced sexual assault, for example, are speaking up. But, for a long time, we felt that was definitely something sisters had to protect themselves from. And when you're by yourself, you got to protect your household as though, you are the authority figure. So just her safety. I mean, I'm a worker bee anyway, but I keep 3-4 jobs and 3-4 streams of income to make sure that she was in a safe neighborhood, that I wouldn't have to worry about somebody snatching her and dragging her down an alley or something. I would go without food to make sure we were in a top-notch secure building that you had to be buzzed in, and there were a few layers of protection, that type of stuff. I really made sure that she was in environments that were safe. So her safety was a huge, and still is, because she's grown now, and so it's out of my control. So that's even more anxiety. But that's a huge thing. Just her safety. And could we have, if we were as such, where you knew the neighborhood was going to look out for her. I used to hear my mom and dad talk about how if you did something wrong, and a neighbor saw you, they were allowed to beat you, and then you went home and you got one there too. And that type of neighborhood, restorative justice type environment where we're all looking out for each other. If I was confident that within my own community that existed, then I wouldn't have to work as hard to make sure she was protected.
Can I offer something real quick, Ricardo?
Go ahead.
I know this is not my space, but
no, go ahead, man.
Talking about courageous conversation.
You're on the table.
I was raised by my mother and my grandmother, right?
Yeah.
And the whole concept of relationships with a black woman was a conscious decision for me, number one. And what I try to do at least from a conversational perspective, not to say that I'm telling Gary, don't date XYZ, but be conscious of the fact that like your mother who birthed you is a black woman, a strong black woman, and has been like my partner for now going on 26 years. And there's a certain level of honor and respect when you choose a partner. So that's my conversation. He's going to make his own decisions. But I really believe that it's important for us to, and that's not a conversation my dad had with me. My mom just said, look, I don't want you to do X, Y, and Z. I don't want to.
You can't say what X, Y, and Z is.
None of that kind of stuff. You need to be with a black woman.
So wait,
and the reason I'm intentional about how I'm saying it is because that can also push you to go the opposite way. It can push you like, all right, So I'm
going to do my thing.
Yeah, I'm just really conscious of and to Kadim's point about there's some things that I learned a lot from my grandmother, a lot from my mom, but there's just some things that you need to hear from a man. And ideally it would be from your father, whether it be in the home or out of the home. But if there was some father type figure that could give you those kinds of insights, would be extremely helpful.
All right, I'm going to move on from relationships. Again, we're surveying everything. Doc, you have Doc, we know that's
Yeah.
your forte. And
Yeah.
I want to touch on this. But
Well-
this is his forte. He can give lecture series on relationships.
He
That's
was
his
leaning
book.
towards that button,
The
make sure that
ties
mute was
that
off.
bind and bruise. That's his
Okay.
book. Doc, you have 2 seconds on this before I move.
Well, I was actually going to, yield the floor for the relationship piece and really and drill down just a little bit on another point that was made that you started, Ricardo, and
Sure. Right.
Doc Smith in here someplace made a reference to it, and I think it's worth highlighting. So think about this a little bit with me. You talk about, right, it's the point that you made, Ricardo, about the conversation, right? And think
Yes.
about, and not to knock our families and our mothers and our friends and all of us who attempt to have that conversation, but think about how absurd it is to try to have a person who is innocent to be more innocent, right? Put your hands on the wheel, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that, say yes, sir, say yes. When in fact, that is not the problem. So in reality, we can teach our kids to do every single one of those things, and they will
Go
still
back
be
to the talk.
there. Because that's not the problem. The problem is not learning to put your hand on the wheel. The problem is not learning to say yes, sir, no, sir. The problem is the man that stands outside of the car with a gun that is cocked and ready to be discharged inside of the car on our young boys and our young daughters. So it's fascinating to me that our only survival mechanisms is to control that which we want, that's right, that which we could influence, and that is to tell our boys to please do this, do that, don't say this, don't stand too tall, don't look them in the eye, don't be too assertive, bow just a little bit, and come across as humble. It is further goes to the point, and I'm not knocking it. Please get me. I'm not knocking it. All I'm saying is this, that the problem is not there. The problem lives in an entire different power structure that needs to be remediated, that needs to be remedied, but we tend to influence what we can and who we can, even though that's
Let's
not.
go there.
Well,
No,
can I ask something to the doctor? Because
Sure.
this is for my own enlightenment, right? Because we were talking about relationships, and a lot of what you were just saying, that the problem isn't, that you don't know how to do this, that, and the other. After the hands on the wheel, when you were talking about don't stand up too strong, don't stand up too straight, don't look them in the eye, don't be too assertive, don't be too that. That's a lot of what we as Black women are told we can't be. Otherwise, we're a difficult Black woman, or you got. So is there some again, I'm just looking for enlightenment. Is there a trickle down effect going on where the Black man is experiencing this from the power structures, and so it's trickling down to his relationship with the Black woman, and now we're told that we have to be a certain way, and if we're not that, then we're a problem, we're the issue, and so that's when they're stepping outside of the culture. Real question.
I'm going to throw in something here while the doctor prepares it. When I was moving to the United States 20 years ago, a friend of mine sat in the airport just to see me off and say bye. And she used these 2 phrases to me. Whatever you do not come back to Jamaica with a white woman or a Black American with issues. Those were 2 things she said to me 20 years ago. And I said, what do you mean? I'm setting up for that. This what you're talking about there, Roger, because what Denise Hill just said is, and I wanted to get to that point, Denise. Could it be to some level that this constant subjugation, dehumanization of the Black man, and I'm going to share even personal experiences with you, caused him to think somebody else rather than his own will approach him even another way that is not combative? If the narrative that's been spoken, I think someone at Zadia said something on about the stereotype, right? If the narrative that is perpetrated is that our women are drama, or women are have these issues, what is causing that? Because it has to be broken down. It has to be broken down where our beautiful Black women think they're at the risk of being single, whatever that is something to be feared because we are going elsewhere.
Here's what I say, right? A lot of times, as a society, we're not ready to talk about race issues. We're not ready to talk about the impact of hundreds of years of enslavement, of what it means for my forefathers to have his woman and for the woman to have her man and have someone else take them at will, impregnate them, take those children that he himself might have born and sell them off across the continental United States and around the world. What are the implications for that and single parent household? What are the implications for the Black woman who, out of a survival mechanism that Dr. Maya Angelou talks about, of really stepping up to the plate and doing the very best that she can to raise her kids, to do the work, and then for our brothers as well to feel emasculated in some ways because she is doing the very best that she can, and he also is wounded because he doesn't always know how to situate himself into the relationship because society has already beaten him down so much, imprison him when he was innocent, remove his very the essence of his very dignity, and so we come back together and we don't even know how to love each other and to how to live with each other and to say, girl, you making $100,000 more than I am, go ahead and do your thing. We can still love each other. We can still thrive together. You could be all that you can be, and I will support you on the flip of a dime. And so the truth of the matter is, my colleagues, is that we want to cherry pick the part of history that we think is still relevant today. But when it comes on to the wounds of a people, an entire nation of people, that we say, it's over, slavery is done, it's over many years ago. But the truth of the matter is, we are history. We live history. History is not of the past. History is actually what we live today.
Denise, are we touching what you wanted there?
Oh yeah, I love that enlightenment.
Okay, let me tell you something about as you talk about the reason why I've not yet pressed into the talk is because I believe the problem is outside the home and not in the home. In terms of what is now in the news about police reform, I'll give you an example. Happened to me. I live in what they call a safe area, which is a veneer. I've always reminded myself. But I was at dinner one night with a few friends, and at that dinner was, some white folks and myself and Asian, a couple of our friends. And the white brother made this comment: whenever police stops me, I grab onto the steering wheel, I hold on to it, and here's what preceded that, what came next, and I'm a white man. Whenever police stops me, I hold on to it for them to see my hands, and I'm a white man. There's nothing else that was said after that. In other words, you, Ricardo, may have a different reality. I know I'm a white man, and yet I do it. I've never forgot that phrase. Just about 2 years ago, that conversation came up. Great guys here, he moved right along. But there's something that was left on the table. I did it, and I'm a white man. What say you? Maybe I have to put my hands outside too, and those other things. Clearly you say that. So the point about the talk is why my son had to say to me, so Dad, why are they killing the black men, the brown men? I've never seen them doing it to the white men. And so it's a conversation that, again, will come after this one, where we have to break that down, the trauma, because I believe, Denise, there's a PTSD, that's what it is. There's a post-traumatic stress disorder that I think permeates the psyche of the African American man, and of course of the women too, because of this constant thing of. Recently, I watched something on ABC News called American Pain, and it pained me to see the journalists, these professional men, told you how the things they did to survive here in America as they reported. One of them said, my smile is what has saved me. You see him every day, my smile. He says, I'm a tall guy. Sometimes I find that I'm trying to get a little smaller, not to look intimidating. I've never in my life not having to walk up my full 6 feet, whatever stature, because I don't need to become small. But when these journalists could say, here's what we do in order not to be intimidated, makes me ask this question. I wasn't ever going to ask this question. Or cute young boys as we grow up, rearing them in our homes, or lovely, beautiful girls. Why do you believe we're perceived a threat? Why does a hoodie means when a black person wears a hoodie, it is something that is a threat of violence, while when a white person wears it, it's cute? Why is it when we plait our hair, there's something menacing about it, but when another race does it, it's a fashion statement? Why?
You're asking some good questions.
Yeah.
I don't. When I was 2 years old, walking around that store that I told you about at the beginning of the conversation and was being followed, I couldn't, like, what am I going to do? I mean, I'm sure that maybe that particular shop owner had some trauma that in anybody who fit the profile of who had been robbing from them, they looked, I don't know their trauma to know why they inflicted that on me. So I'm interested. I'm gonna let the brothers handle this one because I have no answers. I don't know why.
Wait, why is it that when Gabriel puts on a hoodie, Gabriel somehow, in somebody's mind, D.L. Hughley says the most dangerous place to live is in a white person's imagination. Again, guys, welcome to the courageous conversation. We're having it here. Glad to have you aboard. My name is Ricardo Bryan. You see my guest.
Yeah.
Tell me, why is it? Talk to me.
I'm only going to give you, this is from my perspective and my experience, right?
That's what we need, bro.
It is the imagery that I went to China in 2003, and while I was in China, you know, people were staring at me saying, you know, is this dude Mike Tyson? Staring at me, is this dude Mike Tyson? And the point I'm trying to make is people view Black people, because they don't really know us individually, don't have a relationship with us, through the imagery that's perpetuated through society. Just use what's happened over the past week and a half as an example. Depending on the news station that you watch or what you read, you will get that there were anarchists and white supremacists causing problems in the Minneapolis marches, or you'll get Antifa and the Black Thugs. So the what's being, from a perpetuation, from a media perspective, is one thing. The other thing is this whole, I mean, Dr. Ball kind of really talked about it in that it's systemic. We have been dehumanized to such an extent that it is easy to think that this person is a criminal versus that person. I'm walking down my college campus in the middle of broad daylight, and two undercover cops stop me to say I look like I fit the description of someone that's been burglarizing houses. I'm literally on campus, walking to my office, and it's broad daylight. It's a mindset. It is a and I hate.
And wait, if it is a mindset, very little, therefore, as Dr. Ball was referring to, are the things we're teaching our boys, the talk. Does it work? Because I was jogging in my neighborhood in Piscataway 5-6 years ago, as I do every morning, and a police car pulled up on me and said, "We're not bothering you, but we just got a call that somebody," here the words, "kicked down a door and the description fits you."
Yeah.
9 a.m.
Yeah.
Jogging along the place I have lived at that time for 70 years.
Yeah. So I would say two things. So one is, I didn't get to say this, but as a Christian, everything that we do in our household kind of flows through from a biblical perspective. So one is that the talk is I can control how my son acts. I can't control the system. I can only pray the system down and work from a voting perspective and making sure everybody in my town and community knows that we don't simply vote for a president, we vote for a secretary of state, we vote for school superintendents, because all the stuff that we kind of want to get fixed, it's nonsensical to think that we can because of this we can make a flip of a switch without all really understanding how this system works. So I look at it from the perspective of the talk is I can at least ensure that one, he understands how he needs to respond, and she needs to understand how she needs to respond, and two, that the empowerment comes from who they are in Christ as Black people, that they know Christ, that they are fearfully and wonderfully made, regardless of how people perceive them, and that they respond with humility, although with confidence when faced with these tough situations.
In preparing for this talk, I called one of the brightest minds, I believe, that we'll all hear about, Tatiana Leng, to ask her, tell me about some rights and rules that I need to share with my audience tonight, right? And she said, Ricardo, I'll email you something, it will be there. And then she said, note,
Right.
these are the rights, and these are the rules, and these are rights that you have. Does not mean that they're not trample on it.
Yeah.
The word systemic is sometimes, I think, underplayed and even underexplained. Systemic has to be what Davon just texted on the screen. Why does every Black person fit the description? Systemic is when my boys are playing out there and one of my 12-year-old want to walk home from school, and Sash said no, because if you go in that store with all of them and something is missing, they'll say you are the one who stole it and naturally come to you. Systemic is the part for me that takes a depth of thorough reform that maybe some people are not even willing to go at. Dr. Bowley wanted to say something before I jump to the next topic that I think we're all going to be leaning in for.
Yeah, and I think it ties into, my brother, the point of systemic that you're saying. It's like making some fried dumplings and putting the baking soda in it, or the baking.
That's systemic.
You can't really distinguish the baking soda from the flour. But one
By
thing.
the way, Dr. Ball, sorry, need to explain fried dumplings to Denise.
Bakes, Johnny cakes.
I'm good. Right? I'm good.
All right, good. One thing you'll know for sure is that the absence of it will change the outcome. But once it's there, the dough rises just a little bit more. You can't really pull it. You can't sift it out. You can't separate it. And so we are oftentimes stuck. And I understand. And I really want to say that I teach my son. I have the same long conversation with my boys, just so you know.
You do? All right.
I do have the same
conversation that I should.
I think that all of us must do whatever we think is in the best interest to maximize the survival of our next generation.
And that's what it is. Kadeem, did Sister Williams have the talk with you?
She, like I said earlier, she would just tell me, don't stay out too late, or don't go to these certain places, or if there are certain people, there would be like, okay, don't go to this block, or don't go to this area. So unfortunately, we didn't really get too much into the talk, but as I grew older, I understand, like, okay, this is why she said this.
Yeah. It's now 92 minutes into the conversation, guys, and I'm going to the one that we can't have a conversation without dealing with. Everybody on this live tonight are people who are people of faith, one respect or other. We either grew up in church. And the reason I'm going to go next to the topic of the church, central to the Black experience is a church. Whether it offers hope, whether it's how it has been able to soothe our pain. If we can't get the justice in this world, is always speaking about the justice in the year after. But Chris Williams on a post this morning said something, and I want to quote it here. Christianity is in question because racists are and always have relied on the Bible and religion to exert dominance over other races. Jesus was not white, and words in the Bible have been manipulated to aid and the plight of white supremacy. We need to take another look at why racists / white supremacists and the KKK lean on Christianity and the Bible, and why the people who are oppressed worship the same God of the oppressors. Seems strange. I do not readily jump to say, what is the church saying today? You know why? I want to question some of the things we have held onto in our church experience, wondering, has it hurt or has it helped our cause? Ladies and gentlemen, lean in, because I'm going there. Language used in church, I believe, need to be put under the microscope. Black as sin. Lord, wash me and I shall be whiter than snow. Purity, meaning white is a symbol of purity. Black is used as a symbol of sin, what we need to get rid of. What is the mental space that is occupied? What happens to the psyche of the Black person experience when to be white is something superior, something of God? Let's talk about that. Does our theology indirectly or insidiously perpetuate this racial disparity of white superiority over Blacks?
I certainly think so. I definitely think so. Because I mean, as you alluded to, you see all the pictures around, right? And it's white Jesus, right?
Yeah.
It's white Christ. And so now growing up, and I'm somebody that had this mindset, and other people as well. Now growing up, when you're a little kid, you're all automatically thinking that, okay, white, the color of white or a white person now is synonymous with purity or spirituality or being a good person, right? And so yeah, I definitely think it contributes to that, and I'm pretty sure we'll get into this more, but I think it takes more of the church to be able to acknowledge that. I think a lot of that is not being acknowledged in the church. I think it's not acknowledged in the Sunday schools. I never heard it in Sunday schools or, the preacher's message. And so I think, and especially when we're living in a time now where we don't have like an MLK or Malcolm X. We don't necessarily have like a Black Panther part, like leaders per se that's in the media that's leading the Black community. So as you said, the church is the central part, an essential part of the Black community.
Yes.
Therefore, I think it is important that, they have to acknowledge those things, especially for my generation who's going to college and, coming across some unorthodox people who's telling you the truth about your culture, especially telling you the truth about now maybe your spirituality or your religion or Christianity, that it was used to now enslave people in Africa. It was used as a tool to do so. We have to now hear about that in the church.
Right.
Because it's now more than ever, it's being questioned, especially by my generation, on how can you tell me now to practice this religion when this religion was now used as a tool to enslave our own people?
And that's a critical question. Gentlemen, lady, I'm going to lean on this one. It's something that I will not skip over. It's something that I will not accept Christianese about it, because as the 23-year-old man just said, how do we grapple with that as a church, as a people? If we're told that the missionaries that went to Africa and was part of the catalyst of enslavement, right? We're told that. Then the symbols and language used in Christianity, we have to question. We have to examine. We have to deconstruct.
Yeah.
I'll give you one example. Let's jump into this. My sister Paulette, she is she works a lot in children's ministry, and she told me something last week. She said, Ricardo, with everybody I train, and every workshop I do with children, I do not use the picture of Jesus as this white man that is shown. I do not. I use the cross as a symbol of who Jesus represents. Because when the child starts to associate himself, a Caribbean, Black person, African, with this white image, for him, that's not me. And so she said, I do not use that in my children's ministry. And I remember growing up with the Jesus on the wall. They said every Black family have a picture of Jesus and Martin Luther King somewhere in their house, I was told, right? But it makes me ask a question, and it's a question that I need answering is, do you believe that has had some impact, effect, where we have added color, a color to our Christianity in terms of Jesus, in terms of whiter than snow? That's where my brain is.
Let me jump in there a little bit. And I think the way, and then I'll yield the floor to you, Wayne. The way I will frame this is, and I think the way my brain works as a teacher is if you frame the problem well enough, then you could apply it to different situations, right? So in some ways, the conversation that we're having right now it's the same conversation that we're having, but because it's being compartmentalized for to digest it as best as possible. But the common thread that is running through is a systemic racism. So let me give you an example. Where power claims absolute right and domination, it washes away and captures and locks up every single thing.
Everything.
So it captures God and puts him in a box. And so it gives him a color. It gives him a language. It gives him eye colors. It even says which country he's from, and it says which people he loves more than others. That's the ultimate. It tells you that if your African language, that your Spanish language, that your Urdu, and that your whatever other language, that it's somehow English is the most, and it is the
essential.
Right. Everything else have to be done through that. All the celebration, all of the holidays and everything has to now run through that. Even something as beauty, my flare fat nose, is being seen as something to be repulsed by because those who have seized the ultimate power have also put God on their side. And that's why people like James Allen Cohn, who says, no, give him back to me. Give him back to me. He belongs to me. And he says that Jesus is a black man. You know why? Because he was lynched. Because he was lynched on the cross. And so if you go to any nations on earth that profess Christianity, and once they are allowed to paint a picture of Jesus through their own experiences, through their own language, through their own culture, Jesus is actually going to look like an Asian god, like an Asian man, sorry. And so, but what we've done is it's the colonialization of God himself, and we have received that. And so today, in short, the work of the church is to say, hold on a second. Let's slow down a little bit. God is not white. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. And I think that's a crisis. It's a crisis for us to be tossed into this place of saying, oh my gosh, our theology is going to become undone.
And it's a crisis that must be grappled with now. Because I come into you, Wayne, because the reason I question about the church, because it's a central place that the black people have found relevance and hope. And the reason, back to what you said, Dr. Ball and Roger, we have to be able to deconstruct it and not be fearful, thinking in deconstructing our religion, we're throwing it away. It is ensuring that we deconstruct it where it becomes something that is identifiable with who we are and relevant to our experience. Rather than, as I like to say, check our brains in at the door and say, this is what it is. I reject that notion. I think the Kadim's generation had, as he spoke to, if it's not relevant to them, they're moving away.
Yep.
Well, yeah. So the deconstruction of our religion, the deconstruction of Christianity, is to have a frank examination of it, to the extent that you can now identify with it, that it becomes relevant to your journey.
So,
right, Wayne?
So just becoming relevant is so important, and this is not a separate and distinct discussion from when we were talking about how racism is systemic. Part of the issue is that you can use any tool, be it the Bible or any teaching, and make it a law. And if you also say that the person that you're trying to educate can't read. So it's easy to only emphasize parts of the Bible that talks about being good to your master and all that kind of stuff. If on the flip side, you say it is illegal for you to read and you can't be taught to read. That's number one. That was systemic and legal back then. Today's argument about the relevance of the Bible, and again, this is just me, it's also easy to say that the Bible doesn't represent Black folks, that Jesus is white, if you don't read the Bible. The Bible is the story of God's experience in the earth. And if you read the whole thing, you'd find it very hard to be comfortable with someone saying that it's okay to persecute Black people, to be mean to the strangers in the land. It would be very hard.
The immigrants.
And so I think, and to Kadim's point about how, there are lots of people with voices about how the Christianity is a certain way to your people. You battle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. This whole thing is a battle for our souls. And my reading of the Bible says that the only thing that's gonna last is His word. So we've got to understand what the word says about who we are and whose we are within the context of people trying to tell us that Christianity is not relevant to us as a people. It is. I don't want to say. I want to be nice.
Say it.
It's nonsensical as a Christian, as a Black man, who I feel very comfortable and confident that I know Jesus wasn't white. I know that the blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy that was painted was done by Michael.
Right.
All that stuff.
Right.
He was a man. He lived. He died. He ran with thugs. Like, if I know that story, then it helps inform how I try to tell my children this every day. Like, don't tell me that there's not a story, there's not a book of the Bible that you can't relate to, as long as you read it. If you rely on someone trying to tell you what's in it, you're gonna say it's not relevant.
When I hear your passion on that one, and I can tell you, I come from it a different side. I find that I've been on a journey of actually questioning what I've been reading, and asking questions and questioning answers. Because again, I think we all have to be comfortable coming at a place where we look at what we have been taught, socialized in through our religious experience, and figure out, is it sustaining me in the light of what's going on today? I've come to a couple of crossroads where it wasn't.
But my only point, and I don't mean to interrupt, my only point is that, but you're studying it.
That's the difference.
Come to those to ask the questions. If you don't study it to ask the questions, then the argument that it's not relevant to me is not real. Like, you got to study it, which is how Lee Strobel came to faith. You study it, you challenge, the Holy Spirit comes in, and then revelation happens. That's the only point I'm trying to make.
That's my Bishop point. Dennis, you want to say something?
I mean,
we're having the courage of conversation.
We started this whole conversation with the question of education, and so I'm leaning towards what Sir Wayne was just saying, because there's far more who would prefer to be in the outer court than have to do the work to get up in the holies of holies and actually get the insight and the understanding to be able to take anything, like he said, any story or any parable, any wisdom, any lesson, and figure out if it applies. The issue is not necessary. I teach this to my students all the time, you know, if you take lotion and you put it in your hair, the lotion isn't the problem. You applied it wrong. And so when you don't spend the time or don't have the system, because for me, the issue is organized religion, because it is come in, listen to me, tell you what's right, and then you go out and do what I say, and it becomes irrelevant to, you know, this generation, the younger generation, to Kadeem, to my daughter. It becomes irrelevant to them because they're like, I'm not coming to you. I saw how you weren't impacting my mama and my grandmama. So now you need to come to me. You need to show me how this is going to be relevant in my life, how I can apply this in my life. And the educational structure on how do we agree on what to share within our communities. And then once we come to some agreement on what to share, actually sharing it, as opposed to, you know, my mentor, Les Brown, it says it all the time. We prefer to be an entertainment culture as opposed to an education culture. So the work of getting out of the outer court where everybody is to doing the work, to being able to get close to God and figure out exactly what he does want for your individual life, for your household, for your community, for your, you know, all the way up to uttermost, you know, that takes education, that takes work, that takes some systemic structure that right now the organized church is failing at, in my opinion.
Well, guys, and that's what we're having is the conversation. Go ahead, Kadeem. I want to hear from you, man. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think Denise, you touched on something. I think Ricardo alluded to it earlier, but when Denise, you said like the coming to you aspect, right? Or even Ricardo touched on earlier, like even the fear of, you know, if something is being questioned, the fear of now, you know, it not mattering anymore. And I think that also contributes to, I guess, kind of this passive language sometimes, where let's say somebody who's reading and studying the Bible, right? You've done those things, and you look in Revelations and you look at that verse that clearly is alluding to that Jesus was a black man. And you go to somebody in the church and you're telling them, you know, what Jesus was a black man, their response is literally, you know, I'm not worried about the color of what Jesus was. You know, I'm just trying to make it into heaven. Which on one end I totally get and understand. But at the same time, that's a passive response in which someone now took the time to read the Bible, to get engaged, to really educate themselves. And now they're coming to you as an expert, right, within Christianity. And now they've received a passive response of, well, you know, I'm just trying to get into heaven. I'm not worried about the color, right? Or the just pray notion, right?
And
just pray where.
Go ahead, Kadeem. Finish the point.
Where you're literally where, you know, you're going through stuff in life, and it comes down to just pray. And don't get me wrong, I'm somebody, I understand the works of prayer. You know, I'm very, and I don't want to confuse anybody here. I'm definitely someone, I practice Christian religion, very faithful, very spiritual, right? You know, grew up in that household, but as I've gotten older, that, like you said, Ricardo, there are certain things that you kind of challenge, as you kind of make yourself more aware about certain things. There's certain things you kind of challenge, and you look within the church, and like I alluded to earlier, you know, it was used as a tool to reinforce white supremacy, and you see things kind of playing out now in today's society. So, yeah, I think, and that's where it goes back to the days of being passive, especially with my generation, is not everybody's like me, where they grew up in a Christian household. Right, so I had that foundation.
And Kadeem, that's exactly.
So now we need to.
That's exactly where I'm at. I really think, as I listen to the language of my Christian brothers and sisters, there's a language that comes out of hope. There's a language that says pray. And sometimes I find stops between hope and pray. And what I'm saying, and challenging Christians all over, is there must be more to hope and praying. In fact, my personal pastor, Pastor Sam Bass, recently said, prayer must be prelude to action. As Kadeem said, a 23-year-older, is one thing I've observed. Recently, I made a comment on Facebook and somebody said, just pray about it. Have you prayed? And I have to make the comment. I subscribe to a faith that doesn't only requires fervent praying, but critical thinking, bold speaking, and courageously acting. It cannot just be about pray about it. And what I've seen, Denise, honestly, and I wonder if it's our enslaved psyche the trauma of enslavement passed down. It is just pray about it. And I hope is not a strategy. Hope is not a strategy. And that is why as we lean in, we have to say, what must I do in the context of my Christianity that moves the conversation, examining the systemic issues that are at play, that shows itself out in our church experience, as Dr. Ball spoke to, and say, how do we have to deal with this crisis? Because believe me, guys, Kadim is in front of it, the generation coming up. If it's not sustaining them, I don't believe it's a question of saying study more. It's a question of asking ourselves, is how we practice Christianity working in the reality of the society, where we have to engage, I believe, the mental, I said, engage the critical thinking. And that is where Denise, your daughter, said, and the Kadibs are saying, hey, you're not working for me. And that is for me a challenge to our Christianity or church, because it's so central to our existence. What we're preaching, what you're practicing, is it showing up as relevant in what's going on right now today? I'll give you one of them, guys. It's now 1:54, but I'm going to move to the whole idea of empowering our young men. And I'm going to go through with you in some things about empowering them. But many of you may have white friends. I thought I had for quite a few. But during this time of, for me, trauma, I found it curious that many of those who I know and knew went very silent, actually very mute. I have not gotten one inbox from anyone who I know of my white friends say, hi, how are you doing? How are you managing? And I found that it was for me a little interesting. Yesterday, as I walked to the radio station, this white young lady walked up to me. I'm walking into the building, and she had to get my attention to say hi, like, hi, I want to know I'm with you. It's like this element of solidarity touched my heart so much. Never seen her before. I'm walking into the radio station. She walked past just to say hi, like, please know that we're here. So whatever she was trying to indicate, I was like, okay. But I found it curious that none has really reached out to me in a serious way. Says, I want to go to Arthur Ashe. Arthur Ashe says, we must reach out our hand in friendship and dignity, both to those who would befriend us and those who would be our enemy. I'm going to ask all of you, just with your couple of seconds through this, how do we speak to how do we relate to our white friends in what's going on? How do we relate to it? How do we help them relate to us as well, as we reach out hands in friendship, given that for the most part our experience has been oppressed for the most part at their hands?
I will just say, because we've been having these conversations for the past 2 weeks, I would say maybe for the first time, just to be 100% truthful, be 100% honest with, this is and I know people that I went to school with are on this call right now, and we at least as Black Americans tend to hold the majority of the weight and not really share it, particularly with white folks. But be 100% honest about how we feel, number one, and then allow them the opportunity to share how they feel, whether they're supportive or not. Just let them be honest as well, and not have what I've found over this week, particularly with a lot of people on my management team who happen to be white, that it's not an easy conversation to have.
Okay.
To show support. Because they may or may, I've had like 3 conversations with folks that worked for me for 5 years, and the conversations have turned into an hour because they want to express that they don't understand racism because they've never experienced it. So to me, at this juncture, our CEO, our Black CEO, said that it's all about truth at this point, and then we got to move to reconciliation, and then we got to move to action. Like we gotta get it all out on the table first and hear
Yes.
each other, and then try to come to a place where we can reconcile.
Yeah.
And
Then
G Wayne, I second that as well. You need to be able to have those uncomfortable conversations, not just amongst ourselves as a Black community, but with our white counterparts. That's where it starts. Kind of, even when I came out here to Austin, Texas. I mean, I'm on a campus of the University of Texas at Austin, in which the amount of people, mind you, I'm coming from Brooklyn, where every day I'm seeing people that look like me. Where now I'm in a predominantly white institution, yes, but literally the people that look like me, that are Black and African American, I can count, that I see on a daily basis, I can count on my hands, and I'll be lucky if it gets to 5. Right? They're there though. They're there. When you're all together, they're there. But and so even with my students that I work with, one thing I do is I do inclusive dialogues where we have these uncomfortable conversations around privilege, oppression, your identities, where we have those conversations around racism, how it's systematic. And I think also too, we have to also understand, well, one, racism is not just a thing for Black people to overcome. It's everybody's problem, right? But we also have to understand too that we shouldn't be so, when having these conversations, we shouldn't be so quick to now bash somebody for their views, right? If we can have a respectable conversation, I think we also have to understand someone's upbringing. So if you grew up in a household where they didn't talk about racism, or they're coming from a place, or their ancestors were Confederate soldiers or things like that, right? We have to understand now their upbringing and now what they've been taught their whole life. So rather than being so quick to bash them, we have to now be able to just have those conversations that are already uncomfortable, but in a respectful manner in which we're understanding someone's view and listening to actually understand, rather than to just respond or call somebody wrong, despite what the dominant thing is. The first, like you said, the first thing is to lay it all on the table and have those conversations.
Yeah.
Listen to understand. I like that. Doc?
To jump in here, I think that I am very much interested in language. And my sermon over the last couple of weeks has been on Pentecost and the business of speaking language. And I think that it's like learning Spanish or French. You cannot be fluent if you don't practice it. And the issue of race is oftentimes the language. The same way every institution and every industry have their own language and their acronyms and their nuanced, phraseologies. The same thing is true for issues of race. And so, in fact, if we do not practice speaking that language, and so to Kadim's point, is that a lot of Caucasian brothers and sisters remain silent because they lack the linguistic, ability to really engage in the conversation. And so we ourselves, and sometimes we lack the linguistic ability to engage them in the conversation, because all the conversations we've had it with people who look and sound like us. And so it requires some degree of patience on both sides, as we both said, I don't understand. And when I'm teaching my classes and someone wants to bring up issues of race and color or sex and sexuality, they oftentimes drop their voices just a little bit, like they or they're black, and I always sort of just call them out. So why you have to lower your voice? So why you have to drop your voice? And that's because they don't necessarily have the linguistic confidence. And so we have to be patient with each other to really say, you don't have the language, I will teach you my experiences, and we will both become more fluent in each other's experience. And I think that is actually a big part of what is plaguing the church in this last couple of weeks, is that some of my Southern, white, Caucasian brothers do not have the language to have the conversation. And so when you don't have the language to have the conversation, we invariably misunderstand each other and we begin to butt heads together. And so we create further divides rather than saying, let's sit down together and have the conversation. You might not like what I have to say. You might not understand what I have to say. You might not have experienced what I have to say, but you can nullify what I have to say, because my experiences are my own experiences. And I ask that you respect that.
And be comfortable with the conversation.
That's
Denise?
Right. I'm not going to, I'll be transparent. I'm a bit challenged in this area right now. I'm not going to lie. Up until probably 2 weeks ago, I just had very low I came into any encounter with someone who was of European descent with very low expectations, call it self-preservation or what have you, but I just expected the worst and hoped for the best in any encounter. And my code switching game was strong so that I could, in fact, survive and thrive in any encounter. But, you know, within the last few weeks, actually, even prior to the instance with Mr. Floyd, which kind of sparked the national outrage, even prior to that, I work, like I said, in an adult education environment. So while I focus kind of on the GED side and my student population is predominantly African American, I have colleagues who work on the ESL or English as a second language side, and having to have a conversation with them to understand that, listen, you're of another culture, but you're of European descent. And even though you weren't born and raised in America, you have the luxury of privilege granted to you because you look a particular way. If you kept your mouth closed, no one would know that, you know, you spoke Spanish or you spoke Farsi or you spoke whatever. You know, you would be granted the same privileges as a white person in America. And so having to now be forced just within the adult education environment to have conversations with colleagues so that they can understand and to some degree acknowledge that they in fact have benefited from this privilege as well, so that they can begin to approach our learners from a place of understanding. You know, it's not even for me, it's not even for you to have a great encounter with me. At the end of the day, I need my learners not to come out of here more traumatized than they entered into this situation. So I need you to understand your privilege as someone who is of European descent. And so I'm kind of forcing myself to have those conversations and be articulate in those opportunities. But it's a balance of keeping my anger in check too, and not just
here's why I asked
that with something.
And here's why I asked that. After the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, I found that I no longer ran in the mornings with the same ease and peace that I used to. Because and I started to look back at my life and said, how naive were you, Ricardo, that you get up in the morning, 5:30, run to the max, going through the bush. It has nothing to do with where you live. It has everything to do with a demented racist who might just look at you as a threat, going about your business. Can I tell you, for 2 weeks, I went running, I had my headphones in my ears and wasn't playing one song.
Yeah, I stopped running with headphones a long time ago. Yeah.
Not only that, typically, as my neighbors of European descent would run past me and gleefully, and I'm very frank, gleefully wave at me, I found that I resented it. And I was holding my head straight. Because suddenly I started to question all the motives. I started to question, how do they see me really?
Right.
What do they see me coming at them at? What are they visualizing? That's why, just to let everybody know, this courageous conversation series hopefully will be extended to our brothers and sisters of the European descent. But we cannot have a conversation without starting with our family, without understanding the pain of our family, without understanding the pain of our people. Then we open the door to and said, come on in. Here's what we feel. Here's our issues, understood, interrogated, examined, unearthed. Then we invited, and that is for me the arc of this conversation is I need to see why do we feel the way we do. Then we now understand and seek to question, why do you behave like that toward it? And we have that conversation. So just for those of you wondering, Ricardo, do you have anybody missing from the table? Yes, but timing is everything. Denise, you're going to say something?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's I think right now silence is, from our air quotes white friends, is as painful as if somebody gave a racist comment to me. Like, I need to know where you stand at this point. So you need to say something one way or the other. So, I think that the majority of us are keenly aware of who hasn't said anything, whether it's reaching out to us in a text or making a post on Facebook or what have you. At this point, everybody needs to say something. Put your cards on the table. Let's know where you stand.
And that has been, and Dennis, that has been my reality. And I've said, I've been surprised that folks who used to text me every second, where are you? Where I haven't seen you? During this time when I've been vocal, has not said one thing to me. And it made me say to myself, do you really care about me and my pain? Again, I want to grab in some questions. Our technical director behind the scene, Lady Ball, I know might have some questions. But I want to go to some questions next, and then I'll come to you because I want our parting words to be one of empowerment, specific empowerment to our Black sons, to our Black brothers, to our Black sisters, our Black daughters. Is empowerment we're moving to next on it as we go. So any questions, we'll take them now. And before we go. Lady B, anything for me? And while we wait on that, let me just say, because again, my technical director is working hard behind the scene. The technical director, by the way, is loaned to us temporarily by Dr. Ball. Temporarily by Dr. Ball. So here's what I want from you, just swinging around the horn here. How do we empower our Black sons? How do we empower them? Give me 2 or 3 things while you say, add this to the conversation when you speak to them. I am listening, I'm hearing. How do you empower? How do you, of all the things that we've said, examining, questioning, schools, curriculum, systems, we know that, but just imparting for you. How do you say tomorrow morning, tonight, as we disconnect from this conversation in a few minutes, what else can we add to empower?
Ricardo, before our colleagues answer that, let me just invite, and I know that if those who are listening out there, if they could just start posting their questions. So if you have additional questions,
sure,
go ahead.
You can start posting questions, guys. Yeah, I know. Go ahead. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, there's something says here, like someone here said earlier, why do we have to follow those rules of how to act just to survive? Which don't even work, as had been proven, but why people can't just live normally? Why do we? I guess you had answered that question before, eh? It is to give another chance to get home, sadly. Very sadly. And Zadia saw it. It is another chance to reach home safe. Part of the sad reality. But so as I told you, I will have a talk. As the questions come though, let's go through, guys. Give the word for our sons, for a mother who's right now grappling with, because there's not a father in the household. Leaning on you brothers now about this. What are some of the things you say to that single mom looking in, who just really by herself raising? Yeah.
So what I do to help empower is expose the system. So there are very clear systems in place that lean toward wealth building, that lean toward property ownership, that lean toward legacy building, things like that, that aren't necessarily conversations. We talk about conversations about race. The majority of our kitchen tables aren't having conversations about wealth building and generation and things like that. And so exposing the systems and the mindset needed to navigate through those systems to anybody, young Black man, young Black sister who's willing to listen and learn. That's what I do to help empower.
Thanks for that. Kadeem, what would you say to help empower?
I think even to kind of second Denisha's notion, I think everything we talked about has been so complex, right? A lot of complexities of structures and systems. Believe it or not, a lot of people still don't see racism as systematic. Understanding it as systematic. And so something came to my mind as all of this stuff has been going on, that this is a game of chess and not checkers, right? So, checkers is a game of tit for tat, you know what I mean? But chess is really something that you need patience for. You need to understand the complexities of it. You got to understand strategy. You got to be organized, right? you have to understand how to navigate the game. Like even the question that we had of why do we have to follow the rules? Well, maybe that's a part of the navigation where we can follow the rules a little bit, or you can,
Navigate.
act like you're moving on you're getting into where somebody wants you, but really you're working to really make sure that you win the ultimate game. So understand that this is a game of chess and not checkers, which means you really have to also educate yourself. So on top of it, in order to have these conversations, you have to make sure that you're doing the work to educate yourself, to really understand the history, and then also understand what's going on now.
Okay, thanks, Kadeem. Has anyone on the panel joined the curriculum panel in their school system to help make change? Does anyone? I have not. Wayne?
So I'm not on the panel. Actually, Michelle just told me I need to run for the school board.
Okay.
But my kids, when Gary started the Black Student Union 3 years ago, they asked for a few things. One was more Black authors used in the curriculum. Two, more people of color faculty. And just this year, they announced they hired 3 people for the system, 2 Latinas and 1 Black professor. So from a so short answer is I have it, but my kids have, which is really cool.
Well, I love the question, Yvonne Sargent, and I must say that I'll get curious about it actually during the next school year. I'm intrigued by the question, and I really, as somebody who shows up a lot at school, I think I'm going to press in on that one. Right?
Yeah, a couple of things I would note in terms of my work is that on a district level, I do a lot of work in helping the district to form and to think about my Brother's Keeper initiative in supporting young men is one of the things that I do. But I'm also involved in hiring practices and making sure that we hire a diverse staff. And one of the things that I've worked with closely with my school system, with my school specifically, is really so if we're studying Mesopotamia and we're studying about ancient civilization, I think all of that stuff is good, but I actually want to know, do young people know their local history? And so in working with social studies teachers, I invite them to bring in the asthma rate in the community, bring in how many local supermarkets are in there, bring in the amount of truck that passes through the Robert Moses highway in the South Bronx, the scarcity of food, public housing, all of those kinds of things. Is oftentimes I invite teachers not just to follow some curriculum that someone has written that have no idea about our own story in the community. So I've been very instrumental in helping educators to really reimagine what they're teaching and invite young people to be a part of that dialogue in terms of what material should be brought into the classroom, including their own material.
In wrapping up, in my own thing, I want to throw 3 things there, which is I believe in the power of communication. I believe in the power of speaking up. I teach my boys. You're going to hear about them, to speak up, because I believe your ability to explain yourself, your ability to defend yourself, your ability to speak clearly about issues that bother you, that issues that you disagree with, ability to do that is critical. I believe in the empowerment of our young men. So communication for me is key. And then next one I'm going to lead into is mentorship. My father died when I was 7 years old, and I believe a mother who was out selling to take care of 8 children, and a sister who used to abuse me. Paulette Bryan, how you doing? A big sister, but with love. Just kidding, sis. It had to take men of my church growing up in Old Harbor Bay, St. Catherine, to help guide me along and pushing me along the way. So that's where the Roger Balls and the Kadeem and the Wayne Elliott come in. It is to help mentor our young men, for them to see a model of men who are navigating their way through the society and who are living with the stresses and the strains and even under the system, but thriving, not merely surviving. So I've asked all of you, if you may, to introduce your sons, your children to the folks watching, because for me, it's important. Roger Ball talked a couple weeks ago in one of his messages, as he had his two sons flanking him, and he used some powerful words, some which is, they are no threat. And it sat with me for weeks. My sons are no threat. Because they wear hoodies, or because they have plaits in their hair, because they choose to walk with a certain gait as they do, which defines their identity, doesn't mean they're any threat. And it pains my heart to think that my sons, who touch my heart at the deepest level, could be perceived by someone through the prism of a racial prism, a racist prism, as threats. So I'd love all of you, if you may. Kadeem, I know you don't have any children to introduce.
I am the
but
son.
If your sister is close by, pull her into the frame. But go ahead. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Ball. I know you have your boys there. How about bringing them in? I know they got their 15 minutes before. Bring another 15 minutes again for them.
You'll get it done. So these are my sons.
There you go.
Here they are.
What are the names? Introduce us to them.
This is Michael, and Michael is 15 years old. He's in the 10th grade. He's dashingly handsome, and my daughter wants in on it too, by the way. And he is in the 10th grade, and he's an amazing kid. I love him. He has a heart. He does that every day. As soon as he gets up in the morning, he comes to me and he rubs my head. This is Jonathan.
Jonathan, let me see. That's his sports broadcaster.
This is the sport broadcaster, and he is an amazing young man, and he's going places in life. Y'all go back, so let me bring in Vanessa, because she wants in on it too.
Of course. Proud of you, Jonathan and Michael, yeah? Where's Vanessa?
And this is Vanessa, and she has just been accepted into Coppin State University, and so this summer she will be going off to college.
Vanessa, I will embarrass you. My memory of you is your dad lifting you up from the convention center in Albany years ago all the way to the hotel. And I'll tell you, like, what a strong man. Yes, he did, honey. He did years ago. Great seeing you. All right. Wayne?
Yes. So you have my son here. There's a debate in the house about my daughter coming on the screen. Wayne Elliott. His name means man of God. He is 17. He's graduating from Horace Greeley High School this year. As I stated before, he started a Black Student Union at his high school 3 years ago, and was just on a call, interfaith council with the town before this call. He is on his way to NYU Tisch in the fall as a Martin Luther King Jr. Scholar. Was nominated as one of 40 out of 6,000 selected to be a scholar. I'm amazingly proud of this gifted, young man. And like I said, my daughter's gonna give me, she's gonna show me some love. My baby girl, Naila Marie Elliott. Her name Naila means one who succeeds, and she is living into her name as she's a sophomore in high school, and she is going to be. She's already a leader in the Black Student Union, but she's gonna possibly take it over next year as her brother leaves, and she's also gonna a powerful volleyball player.
And please look at them. They are no threat. Okay,
they're not
over
threats.
to you. No threats. Hey, Denise, over to you.
I love names with meaning. All names have meaning, but this is Niara, which means of high purpose. She is a senior going into being a senior at the New School for drama. She's a powerful playwright, and my baby.
All right, that's your baby. Hey, and she's no threat. She's just a brilliant young lady who's just been blazing this trail. Everybody, we're going to see her on television very soon if you have not missed her already. Yeah?
And,
all right, yes, that's what I believe in you. Right?
She can meet, they're going to be in the same spot.
Yeah.
There you go. And these are my young kings. Zachary Orlando Joseph is his firstborn. Zachary can do some smiling now, all right? for the world to see, right? Zachary has a problem with smiling. He's an amazing basketball player. He's a budding saxophonist. And he has been broadcasting with me from he was about 2 years old, see? About 2 years old, he's been coming to LLIB with me. And wrecked the place many times, but eventually reached a point where he's all right. So Zachary, he's in middle school, Hammarskjöld Middle School, and just an excellent young man all over. And this is Nathan William James Bryan. Nathan William James Bryan is the most articulate, eloquent young man you'll ever find. He's 9 years old, and he's the one who challenges all the teachers every time about everything. So that's Nathan William James. And Nate, you can look at the camera and say hi to the folks. And one of the things I did one day, I came home and I decided I need my sons to know who they are. I will not define them by looks, being handsome. I will define them by their character and who they are inside. So I wrote something for my children to say every day as we drive to school. And Nathan is going to say that for all of you now. Nathan, ready?
Yeah.
Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Nathan William James Bryan, and I am awesome. I am amazing. I am talented. I am smart. I am brilliant. I am loved. I am disciplined. I am focused. I am healthy. I am attractive, and I am blessed.
Thanks, Nate. What do you want to tell them to do?
If you're having a bad day or not really doing well, just say that and you might feel better.
I believe they will, right? And that's who you are as well. And of course, she will not be left out because she's a queen. Please say hi to Malia. All right, thanks. Thanks, boys. Thanks. All right, guys. This leads me to do my final and of course, really thanks everybody for that. They say that okay, Pops, that's fine. You can come off screen now. I'm done. It leaves me to say that's Maddie, right?
Yeah, that's Addie. That's the one that the need
said. Yeah.
Yes, she is.
They say that when the officer knelt on the neck of George Floyd for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I'll be using the last 8 minutes and 46 seconds of this program to breathe life into the young men who are watching, into the young women. I'm going to read from James Baldwin Fire Next Time, a little excerpt that says, "You were born in a society which spelled out with brutal clarity and in as many ways as possible that you are a worthless human being. You are not expected to aspire to excellence. You were expected to make peace with mediocrity. Wherever you turned, James, in your short time on this earth, you have been told where you could go and what you could do and whom you could marry. The details and symbols of your life have been deliberately constructed to make you believe that what white people say about you. Please try to remember that what they believe, as well as what they do and cause you to endure, does not testify to your inferiority, but to their inhumanity and fear. There is no reason for you to become like those people. There's no basis for whatever their impertinent assumptions that they must accept. The terrible thing, old buddy, is that you must accept them. And I mean that very seriously. You must accept them and accept them with love. For this is your home, my friend. Do not be driven from it. Great men have done great things here and will again, and can make America what America must become. It will be hard, but you come from sturdy stock. Men who picked cotton and dammed rivers and built railroads, and in the teeth of the most terrifying odds, achieved on an unassailable, monumental dignity. You come from a long line of great poets, some of the greatest poets in Homer. One of them said, "The very time I thought I was lost, my dungeon shook and my chains fell off." Know for sure, my black brother, know for sure, my black son, that you are great. You have greatness within you, and you're come from strong and great stock. And my parting words come from Nelson Mandela. No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin, or his background, or his religion, but must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes naturally to the human heart than its opposite. So we love your neighbor and we love each other. I say to you in closing, keep the conversation going. The conversation has only begun. I'm honored to have had my guest here tonight, my brothers and my sisters. You can bring them on the screen back for me, Dr. Senator Seneca Ball. I want to say thanks to everyone who have participated. Thank you so much for coming on. I want to say thank you to the very hardworking technical director and producer, Lady Mrs. Seneca Ball. Thank you all for joining. And remember, go ahead, have that courageous conversation this week at home, at work, with your neighbor, with your friends, in love. Until next time, good night.